I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you Todd Harmonson. He's our senior editor down at the Southern California News Group. He will be hosting our main call and bringing our journalists from both Bay Area and Southern California. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Aaron, and congratulations.
Thank you.
I am going to be taking August 21st in the pool, so give me a chance there, okay?
Right.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's discussion about the NFL. This is one I've been looking forward to because my roots at the Orange County Register, which is part of the Southern California News Group, go back to when I was hired to cover the NFL in 1998, at a time when there was no NFL in the Los Angeles, Orange County area. So I spent a lot of time going around the state covering 3 of the teams that we're going to be talking about today, and going to St. Louis to cover one of the other teams that we're going to be talking about today. So I saw a lot of good football at that time. It just wasn't here. So I saw the catch too. I was covering that game. I dealt with this young up-and-coming coach who was really intense, a guy named John Gruden. Nowhere as much as Jerry McDonald has over the years, but I got a taste of him then. Covered the Chargers before Phillip Rivers was a part of the organization, which is saying something. And then covered the Rams when they won their Super Bowl. And I was the guy who asked Georgia Frontiere, what message did she want to give to the people of Orange County about what this means when they won the Super Bowl? And she said, it proves we did the right thing by moving. Just wanted to twist that dagger one more time for people here. So I've had a lot of good football experience in my life. It's not just that I win fantasy football championships that I'm doing this. But you could also call my my football intelligence into question. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I put up through with all the years between Marino and Tua, and it's been miserable, but I'm faithful. So that's why we're going to be relying heavily on our panelists today to talk to you, because they know a lot more about this than I do. We're going to be discussing everything from what are the likelihoods of actually having a full season to social justice issues, and then we're going to talk some football as well. If you have a question for us, please use the Q&A function on the screen, and we'll get to as many questions of yours as we can. But I've got some questions for them. First, I want to go around the horn and have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do. So let's start off with Cam Inman, who covers 49ers.
All right, thanks, Todd. Welcome into the Levi Stadium press box here from, I think, last season's playoff run. I've been covering the 49ers in the NFL for 20 years. I grew up here in Santa Clara, Bay Area native. And, I've covered pretty much every sport that there is. And, football is my niche. I really enjoy covering football. I've been to cover about 8 Super Bowls, including the 49ers' 2 losses, the Raiders' most recent loss back in 2002, I believe it was. Jerry can chime in on that. I started out in sports writing when I was in high school. I attended what Todd and I also attended, the California Scholastic Press Association workshop for high school journalists.
I was Cam's counselor.
He was my counselor, and it's been a great treat that we go down every year and every summer to help tutor high school journalists, which refuels the fire, which reminds us why we really love journalism and try to point people in the right direction. And anyhow, so I've been working basically for this newspaper chain for 25 years. I started in Pleasanton at the Valley Times office, which folded into the Contra Costa Times, which is now, we're all part of the Bay Area News Group, which consists mainly of the San Jose Mercury News and East Bay Times, but we have a lot of other sister papers out there. And we have some very good Southern California brethren now that we enjoy. So thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Cam. Jerry, you've been covering the Raiders for a while. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, from their entire 25-year second run in Oakland, that's when I started concentrating on football. I graduated from San Jose State in 1981. Was working for the Daily Review in Hayward not long after that, and now the way the organization is kind of morphed and changed and acquired other papers. I've basically been with the same place for more than 35 years. The last 25 of which has been mostly concentrated on Raiders football. So I've seen 4 good teams in 25 years. They had 3 division titles and then another 12-4 outlier in 2016. And I think my career started mostly because I, procrastinated in high school and always put assignments off and found that I could get decent grades if I waited till the last night to write something. And that's kind of what the job is. And it's something I fell into. It's something that I love to do, going to sporting events as a youth. And it just kind of, things went hand in glove. And a little bit different this year, obviously, with the Raiders in Las Vegas. But not as different as I thought it was going to be right now because you don't get any access. I mean, I can get the same Zoom calls in my office here that everybody that's in Las Vegas can get. Whether I'll be making any trips down there, I don't know, but I'll be following them and analyzing mostly from a distance rather than, doing nuts and bolts. I think that's going to be our strategy this year. So it'll be interesting. And I think the whole season, the whole landscape of the whole season is so different. And that's kind of what this whole job is about, is adjusting to things that change, and things are changing constantly.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. All right. The relative newcomer to our group has been covering the Chargers for us for a little bit, and I'd like to introduce Gilbert Manzano.
Hey, what's up, Todd? I won't have a long intro because I don't go way back like these guys. So I'm kind of new to the football beat. I've been covering the Chargers for the past 3 seasons. So I haven't seen too much bad football, but it was a pretty bad year a year ago when they went 5-11 and Phillip Rivers was throwing a lot of interceptions. That was kind of fun to watch for a little bit. But I guess for me, it kind of just started like these guys, just reading the newspaper. I grew up in Pasadena, California. One of our newspapers, the Pasadena Star-News. I read that every day, and I guess I kind of became a sports fan or a sports freak, and I kind of just wanted to make it a career. I covered the Raiders for a little bit. I was living in Las Vegas. I worked at NFL.com for a little bit. Not too much for me, but I always kind of been a football fan and a sports fan.
Great. Thanks, Gilbert. And then somebody who's had several roles with Southern California News Group, kind of like me. And I spent my first 28 years in sports and now kind of out of it. He has been back and forth and is back into sports now. Kevin Modesty covers the Rams for us.
Yeah, good morning. It might be unusual in the newspaper business that all 4 of the writers in front of you are working in the area where we grew up. I'm an LA native, grew up a big LA Rams fan. Saw this week that my first favorite athlete, Roman Gabriel, just turned 80. So it's a kick to be covering the Rams just since the start of last season. It's obviously a much different role being an objective reporter versus being a fan, but still need to get to know a franchise that I thought I knew before. I did do a few things in the 40 or 50 years in between. Sports writer, sports editor, covered the Dodgers, covered horse racing for a number of years. I was a sports columnist, and then took a detour, a step down from sports to covering real life. Wrote politics, wrote editorials for a while, but decided that I really wanted to be back in sports. And of course, I got back just in time to be covering sports in a year when real life is inescapable, even in our bubble, pardon the expression. But it's still fun and cool to see how, in this case, the NFL is dealing with the outside world. Good to be with you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. And welcome to anybody who's joined us just in the past few minutes. We're going to be talking the NFL. We're going to talk a little bit about, as Kevin just alluded to, the real life that is playing such a big part of what the sports world is like in 2020. And please use the Q&A function if you do have any questions for our panelists, and we'll get to them as we can. But I've got some for them to start off. And I'm going to open this up to all of you. We can't talk about the NFL without first dealing with the coronavirus. When we see that baseball is struggling so much already to keep teams healthy, and much of the rest of the sports world is really on shaky ground. How can we have a football season? I'm kind of a pessimist, but I'd love for somebody to show me that it can happen. So what has to happen to make this work? Cam, you want to start it off?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, we're about a week or two into training camps, at least in terms of the testing protocol. I would say it's been very encouraging from the NFL's point of view on that, where you have only about 2 or 3% of the players have tested positive, or we don't know if they've actually tested positive. They've gone on the COVID list because they may have been around somebody that was infected. But the problem with that, Todd, is we're still about a week and a half away before these guys get in full pads and start hitting each other, right? And more than that, are they going to stay within that kind of team bubble and not going out and jeopardizing their health and then their teammates' health with exposure? I would say every day they get closer to the season and there's no big major flare-up, that's encouraging. It's asking a lot. I don't think the NFL players are going to be playing with some kind of a face shield. These guys, it's a very rough game. I don't know how much oxygen can flow in these protective masks. I don't think a lot of guys are going to want to wear them if they're getting tested as well. I'm trying to be optimistic, and so far the NFL is showing that things are going the way it should. But at the same time, I feel like this is like the Super Bowl pregame show that we really don't know what's coming yet. And if anybody knows for certainty what's happening, they're lying, because nobody knows.
Yeah, absolutely. How about Jerry? What do you think about this?
Well, I think the players are better off now in their own facilities being watched and tested than they were before they got there, when they were, working out with each other kind of on the sly and finding places to work out that would let them work out, and nothing was regulated. I kind of see it, I think the way money basically talks, and I think that there's so much money at stake that I think the season's gonna go on, and I think there's a good chance that they're gonna finish it. And I think there's gonna be guys that go on the COVID list from time to time. It's just something that they're gonna deal with. They're gonna play with few fans or no fans at all. It's gonna be real different. But I think the games, for the most part, are gonna take place. With the outlier being, the way things are now in sports, where so many baseball players test positive, but it's still kind of a shaky ground, but it's going on, and some football players are. Well, think back to when Rudy Gobert tested positive and the sports world spun off its axis. That was one guy, and now it's happening daily. And people are kind of just going with the flow. I think the outlier being that if a prominent athlete or professional athlete goes on a ventilator or worse, then we'll see what happens, because you can see that it's a pretty reactionary environment.
Yeah, well, and unlike some leagues where, say, in baseball, they've got these 60-man rosters where they can pull. You don't have those deep rosters in football, and maybe that's something that they work with a little bit to keep more people in reserve. And you don't have a minor league system, to replace these people if you get, say, your entire offensive line wiped out. But we'll see.
But hey, Todd, one thing on that though, football is so used to the next man up mentality, where these guys get injured constantly. And if you have that bigger practice squad list that they've increased, they're going to have a longer list of guys on call. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that they've got that chart ready to go to plug guys in. So football's more used to having to plug guys in and adapt, I think, than some of these other sports.
No, that's a great point. Gilbert, you're hearing much yet about what the Chargers are doing in terms of their precautions, and how are you seeing the future for this season working?
Well, the Chargers haven't told us too much about all their protocols. I think I tried to ask one time. They're like, "We'll be here all day if I gave you the list of protocols," and I don't blame them, because it's a pretty lengthy list. But from the Chargers' point of view, I don't know if they're lucky or they're being responsible, but they haven't had anybody on the COVID list. They haven't had anybody opt out. They've had all 80 players practicing this past week, and you've seen all these players on the reserve COVID-19 list, and the new list they created, coming in and out. And for the Chargers, whatever they're doing it right. But it's like Cam was saying, it's so early. We really don't know how these things are going to shake out. It's only been a couple of weeks, but so far it's working. But I think for the Chargers and the NFL, it's kind of like preparing for the worst case scenario. Like when something happened that's big, well, how do we kind of react to that? Like say there's a breakout on the offensive line and maybe 5 players are out. How do you fill those guys? I know you expand the roster, the practice spot to 12 to 16, but there might be maybe a bad week where you just lose 5 or 8 guys, and how do you replace that? Do you postpone games like you're seeing in baseball? So I think for now it's kind of like gotta wait to see what's the worst case scenario, but hopefully for the NFL that doesn't get to that point.
And Kevin, the Rams. I've seen Sean McVay has talked a lot about it, and I've heard some from Aaron Donald, recently. What are they saying about this right now?
The Rams have done pretty well, relatively well. 2 players on the COVID list, one of whom is already off. 1 player opted out, a backup offensive lineman, and then 2 offensive linemen added during the off season, but by all accounts are back to normal. I think the reasonable expectation is to think that the NFL won't be able to have a normal season. Now, define normal. I guess it's already abnormal. But then be pleasantly surprised if it can. For the reasons anybody can see, the nature of football will make it pretty hard to contain a virus if it gets into a team. And so the challenge is to keep it out of training camp, stop it with the tests at the gate. And so it comes down to the responsibility of players who, after all, are going to be commuting from camp to home. And, unlike leagues that are in a bubble, unlike even a normal training camp, when teams might be staying in hotels or campus dormitories in a more controlled environment. So I guess I'm pessimistic for the purpose of setting a low bar. So we'll be happy when it goes better than expected.
Well, great, and we'll save most of the questions till the end from our audience members. But there's one that just makes so much sense right now, and maybe just one of you can take it, or a couple of you want to jump in. But Stephen Gordon asks, how will COVID affect your access to players and coaches during the week and after games? It's going to be pretty much the same around the league. So who wants to take that one?
Well, I have a question for the other guys. First, we as 49er reporters haven't had access yet down there. It's been strictly Zoom calls with players this week, which is understandable, even though they're back on the fields doing walkthrough practices. From what I understand, once the full pads come on in a week and a half or so, August 17th, that's when we'll be able to be on the field, but we will not be getting any access in the locker rooms this season. Our media room is inside Levi Stadium, which is where the locker room is. We will have no access inside the media room this year. So what they're doing with the 49ers, from what I understand, their early plan was, we can come in and only watch on the practice field, but then any interviews we do is going to be a Zoom interview with the coach and the players. But I don't believe it will be allowed on site other than just being able to watch the 2 hours of practice. And I think that's probably what's going to continue into the season. And in terms of the health protocol, I mean, we've seen how professional teams are trying to keep outside media at bay as much as they can. This is I don't want to say it's an excuse, but it's understandable. They don't want to expose. They're all about mitigating risk. So if you can keep outside elements away from getting inside your bubble, that's what they're doing.
Well, Raiders media is actually testing writers tomorrow in a parking lot setup where, when they do open practice, and it's going to be almost like a pool situation. They're only going to let a few people in to see practice, and not everybody's going to get in. And they're going to have to be tested and cleared before they even get inside. And it's been the same thing with the Raiders. It's all been Zoom calls, but we've only had a couple. And like I've seen, I've been watching what Cam's doing because I'm going to be caddying for him a little bit in the Niners this year. And they're getting dramatically more players than the Raiders are. We've had, I think, 2 since it started. We had Henry Ruggs and Derek Carr, and that's been it. So not expecting a lot.
For the Chargers, kind of been with Jerry's game. We're getting one or two players a week on Zoom, and we're all doing the same stories. So it's kind of frustrating that we're getting the same quotes, the same interviews, and we're writing the same features every day. So hopefully we get more access throughout the year. But for right now, it's very tame. And I guess for the Chargers, we're kind of more on the Niners side. We're not getting tested. We're gonna watch practice from a distance, far away. And then do a Zoom call with players maybe 50 yards away, which is going to be so weird out there, on the August heat to do all these Zoom calls, and keeping a distance. But it's going to be an adjustment for everybody, and I'm just kind of looking forward to at least be out there and watch some football eventually.
I haven't seen a Rams player in the flesh in the calendar year 2020. We've been doing fairly regular Zoom calls with coaches and players since camp started on Monday. We've been getting one player a day. We got the coach, we got the general manager the first couple of days. And as you can see from a conversation like this, Zoom serves a purpose. It does the job up to a point, but it means that the teams are controlling who we get and for how long. And it's kind of hard to sidle up to somebody on Zoom and ask that one question that you want to ask that the rest of the group shouldn't hear. So we'll see really how it changes what you, the reader, get about your team. But Rams writers aren't going to be tested. We're technically going to be working off the facility in a tent that's not in the building. Same with Gilbert, watching practice from a distance once we get access. But for now, I think we're all working from home and making it up as we go along.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of 2020, right? Where everybody's making the adjustments. The other big thing that we're all dealing with this year, and the NFL has been dealing with and will have to address even more than ever before, seems like, are the issues of race relations and social justice. There's been rumblings over the years about what the league has done about this. Some people saying nowhere near enough. And then there was a moment this summer where a group of players put together a video and basically confronted the league over its lack of embracing the Black Lives Matter message, and at a time when such a high percentage of the players are Black in the league, plus all issues of racial inequity. The commissioner seems to he got the message, obviously, and responded pretty quickly, and this season appears to be different in the way that the leagues can go about it. I'll go back to you, Cam, and start with it, because this all kind of started in some ways with Colin Kaepernick and the Niners. Do you think it's going to be a real change this year, or is this just surface level stuff?
Todd, I think it's more surface level talk, especially with COVID hanging over everything, more so than the social equality movement. And like you said, I mean, in 2016, this is when a lot of us on the 49ers beat in the Bay Area really kind of took hold of what the message was. Colin Kaepernick was a guy who was very quiet and shy his first few years in the league. And then all of a sudden in 2016, amid his protests, he loved talking about this. And it wasn't about football and social inequality. It was social inequality and race relations and police misconduct. Everything that has really captured America's senses this summer. And so it was kind of like, yes, I've seen how this plays out already. There's more players are willing to come forward, I think, and talk about it. They're more comfortable doing so now that a lot of America realizes this. And that's great. Okay. Like yesterday we talked to Fred Warner, the 49ers star linebacker. He said for a while there, he wasn't comfortable talking about it because he never felt discriminated against. But now he realizes with his platform, he wants to share that everybody should be treated equally. And that's great. But here's the thing, from a reporter's point of view, like my job was never to pick side whether Colin Kaepernick was right or wrong. My job was, here's the message he's putting forth. You interpret it how you want. some people in sports fans, they love it. They want it. They want to see people stand up for their rights. Other people despise it. They want to have their sports and not have it cross over with social elements. That polarization exists continuously. I mean, you'd think it's changed in the 4 years because we saw the movements over the summer and spring. I'm not sure, because I can post something on Instagram with somebody saying that, and I can just judge by the likes or the responses I get. I can kind of test the pulse of the fans, and it's mixed.
And Randy Hoffman had a question that is a good one for you, Cam. Just kind of, he's asking if anybody has picked up Colin Kaepernick, but what do you think do you think there will be a team at any point that will, maybe as COVID knocks out some quarterbacks?
Well, that's the only door I think that can open, because if he hasn't been signed through what was going on in the spring and summer, and now that camps are underway and he's unsigned, I mean, you're starting to see some of these other veterans come aboard for like reclamation projects, and Colin would have to fall into that situation. But Todd, honestly, I think it's done. I don't think he's playing football again. I was one of those that tried to watch whatever sham of a workout the NFL had set up that he shifted off and did on his own. And he looked so stiff and just, Herculean up top. And it just, I personally never had a problem with Colin. I enjoyed covering him. I think we got along really well. But I think he's very sincere about the social equality movement. And I think he realizes he has a stronger presence there than it would be going to be the number 3 or number 2 quarterback somewhere. But I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, like you said, teams may be desperate for a quarterback, and they may realize bringing Colin in might be a good thing for them. And that's, for football, it's really, is this going to help us win games or not? And if somebody comes to their, I don't want to say comes to their senses, but figures out that he would fit into their system some way, like Baltimore, Greg Roman as former coordinator with the 49ers. If Lamar Jackson gets hurt, it'd be a great fit in Baltimore.
Yeah, certainly. Gilbert, you cover one of only 3 black head coaches in the NFL, and Anthony Lynn has, he's kind of embraced the role, and he's had some stuff to say about this over time. Can you talk about the role that he's playing this year?
Yeah, when everything kind of broke out with the George Floyd protest, I kind of was waiting for Anthony Lynn to speak up, because he's a guy that people listen to, gravitate towards. They want their opinion. And for a little bit, I was like, okay, he's taking a little longer than I thought, because I think you saw Brian Flores speak out and give this great statement about it. And then it turned out that Anthony Lynn wanted to take his time and make sure the message got delivered. It didn't get lost. When Colin Kaepernick was, kneeling during the anthem, the message got lost. People forgot he was just trying to raise awareness. It wasn't a protest, towards the anthem. So once Anthony Lynn finally, he called a reporter, a columnist, to just talk to him, hear him out, share his personal experiences, and he opened up about one time he got pulled over, and I think he said it was because of the color of his skin. He was saying that, if I didn't know who you were, you're probably would be in jail. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to coach the game the next day. So he pretty much just did whatever the police officer asked. So sharing stories like that kind of opened up the eyes of his team, his players, and maybe people who follow the Chargers. But it's not just about sharing your stories. I think Anthony Lynn is about, actions. How do you take it a step further? How do you kind of start solving the issue? Because he's seen the worst of it. I think he's 51 years old, and he's kind of tired of it. He wants things to change. So I think for these past few months for Anthony Lynn, he's been bringing in lawyers and judge and city officials to talk to the players to see how you could create change. And I think for a player that really stuck to him was that's having those conversations that really was hanging with was Justin Jackson, the running back for the Chargers. He's been very political, speaking. Isaac Rochelle, defensive end for the Chargers, he's always doing great work in the community, and they always credit Anthony Lynn for saying, hey, he lets us speak our mind, have our voices heard. So when you have a leader like that, that makes you comfortable to kind of be who you are and to believe in what you want to believe in. I think that makes it easier for a lot of these players.
Yeah, Jerry, you cover a team that was always kind of been at the forefront of having coaches of color, having, heck, Amy Trask is the most prominent female executive in league history. Why have the Raiders been different over the years than some organizations?
Well, because of Al Davis, and that's really the only reason. Al and when he was with the Raiders, he and the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Diego Chargers, or the Los Angeles Chargers for a year, and then the Chargers, they were the teams that were going into the HBCU schools and mining black talent that the NFL wouldn't touch. And Al legitimately never cared. He held plenty of grudges, but he didn't care about color or any of that stuff. And it's something I think they've tried to carry on for the most part. I mean, even Mark Davis, it was last year or 2 years ago, when they lit the torch in honor of Al Davis, he had Tommy Smith come and light the torch. You think any other NFL team would even think of doing that, even if the owner is socially conscious? I think that's kind of the way they looked at things. I think they still do to the most part. I think you could point out, though, that I think of their 18-man coaching staff, I think they have 4 coaches of color, which is not great. Their head coach is not he's just not interested in any other issues besides football, whether there's social issues or anything. I mean, he's just all football all the time. He doesn't really want to take time with anything else. Any feelings he does have on the subject, he keeps to himself. But the players, I mean, there was Jared Cook last year, and the players had plenty of interesting things to say. I'm kind of with Cam on this. I mean, there's a lot of superficial things going on with the NFL, but I think most of the owners are white. A lot of them were Donald Trump, donated to Donald Trump's campaign. And I think a lot of this, what we're seeing among teams, among ownership, is window dressing, while with the players, what you're seeing is legitimate.
Yeah, Kevin, how about with the Rams?
The Rams,
I haven't heard a lot about this yet.
Well, the Rams were pretty quick at the height of the George Floyd protests to call a team meeting, a video stream team meeting, but it was probably 120 members of the roster and staff talking for, they said, 90 minutes about these issues. And now the Rams chief operating officer is a white man, general manager a white man, the coach Sean McVay a white man, and they made the point of saying, we haven't experienced this, but we want to know what it's like to experience that. And they listened to their players. And I think that's the step, if that's all talk or window dressing, true. But it seems like a significant step that NFL teams and NFL management are now acknowledging that this is on the minds of the players, and the players make the league go, and you can't ignore it anymore. And that experience seemed to go over well for the players and the staff of the Rams.
Great, thanks. One of the other big issues that 3 of the teams that we're talking about today are facing, they're making some pretty big moves this year. I'm not talking about their rosters. That we got new stadiums, and this is we're talking about moving into a palace in Inglewood for the Rams and the Chargers, and then the Raiders. Well, shockingly, the Raiders are moving towns again, and probably will still have the biggest fan base of all. How are these moves going to affect these teams, and will it be different in a time when maybe we won't see fans at all in the stands than if this had been a regular year? Kevin, let's just start with you.
Well, I guess I'd like to hear Cam's experience, or Cam's view of the 49ers experience moving into a new stadium. It is going to be different because the Rams won't have fans, or won't have many fans all season. Won't have any games to warm up in the stadium. If things go as scheduled, they will open SoFi with the first ever event there in the regular season opener in prime time against the Dallas Cowboys. They'll have some scrimmages, they say, between now and then in SoFi, I guess, to get their eye in and get used to used to their surroundings. But I would think the home field advantage will be about half a point in that opener.
Gilbert, this has always been kind of an odd one for the Chargers in that this is a stadium owned by the Rams or by Stan Kroenke, but it's still a pretty cool home. I kind of liked watching them at whatever they were calling StubHub or the other names for the glorified high school stadium. But this is a big move for a team that hasn't had the first class kind of stadium in a long time.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if having no fans is a good thing for the Chargers or not, because you hear the jokes all the time. The Chargers don't have a fan base. The road team outnumbers the home crowd. So I guess you kind of eliminate the pressure of trying to sell 75,000 tickets at your new home as a second tenant at SoFi Stadium, which there's people that don't see it happening. But I think for the Chargers, I think they were kind of just eager to show that they do have fans, because I think that game at the Coliseum against the Rams in 2018, it was pretty much 50-50 split. And that place holds like 100,000 people, and it was Chargers and Rams. And that's what the Chargers kind of hang their hat on. It's like, hey, we do have fans. It's just when it came to that soccer stadium we were talking about, Dignity Health Sports Park, that long name there, when you have season tickets for that and it's 30,000 people there, and you could sell them on StubHub for 3 times the face value, I'll jump on that deal every day. I'm going to make a profit out of it. Now that they're going to a kind of a normal size stadium, you can't make that big profit. I think people were going to hold on to their tickets. So it's for the Chargers, you can't figure out, do they have enough fans already? Maybe are they relieved that they get an extra year to kind of build that fan base and maybe get to at least a respectable size like 50,000? We won't know for 2020, and they bought themselves a year. But at least on the bad side, you're going to hear the jokes about they're used to playing without any fans.
And Jerry, I'm trying to think, are the Raiders just the most brilliant organization in that they move all over and keep picking up fans and build that fan base? And now they're not at a horrible distance from Southern California or the Bay Area. And everybody likes going to Vegas for when you can actually go to games, right? Is this just great strategy on their part?
I think it's more something they've blundered into by not being able to get a stadium deal until now. And I think they did something, I think, that nobody thought that Mark Davis could ever pull this off, and to get a stadium, and especially because he was not going to be able to do it up in Oakland. Wasn't going to get the public money. And as soon as $750 million came up, they were as good as gone. I think they do have a good sized global fan base, as they like to call it. I don't know if it's quite as big as they think it is. I've always thought that there was sort of a squeaky wheel thing going with the Raiders, and since you see them and they're so out there and so animated that you think they're everywhere, and they're not quite as big as you think they are. They had trouble selling out a 50,000 seat stadium up here with the cheapest tickets in town for a lot of years, until the last few years when they finally started to figure out a way to get people in there. But I think the thing that's going to be missed the most when we talk about diversity and such is it's the most diverse fan base that there is. I mean, I've walked through parking lots in just about every NFL city, and there's nothing like Oakland. I mean, and people, you laugh and you think it's all criminal and this and that, but I think a lot of that is racial and profile. I think it's a great fan base for the most part, because it's the most diverse fan base there is. Best barbecues, all kinds of different nationalities. I'm really curious as to where they can carry that over. I mean, they had a great parking lot scene in Oakland, and I don't think they're going to have that at all in Las Vegas, even when they do start to let fans in. When they do let fans in, is it going to be this transient in for Las Vegas just to see the game, not really Raider fan base? Is going to be a rabid Raider fan base? I think you'll find it. I think Cam can speak to this. A new stadium is not that big a deal if your team is not any good. That's when the stadium gets good, is when your team is good.
So I got to interject with a quick Raiders parking lot story. Back when I was covering the league and we didn't have teams here, I would fly up to Oakland or San Francisco or drive down San Diego. So one day I flew up to Oakland, took my rental car into the lot, and the guys parked next to me were barbecuing, and they needed a jump because they'd killed their battery. So we jumped their battery. They offered me a beer. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. I declined because I was going in to cover the game. Came out hours after the game, after riding, and found beer bottles wedged behind the tires of my car. Same beers that they offered me. They were colorful fans up there. I always had fun in Oakland. Cam, what does a new stadium mean to a team? It's not that long since they had new digs there for the 49ers.
To a team, it means a gold mine for money. To the fans, it means what happened to our our stadium was old, but that dump was our dump, right? That's where the memories were. So the 49ers stadium, like you see here, for the first few years, less and less fans were coming because it was costing more. The product on the field wasn't good. And as Jerry said, once this team starts doing well, that's when you kind of become one with the stadium. Those first couple of years, brand new stadiums are very sterile. There's no smell of stale beer on the ground. There's no memories that have been formed there. It's more about seeing the sights of, oh, that's cool. Let's go check this part out of this. Look at this part of the artifacts, and that's great. And I love going to new baseball stadiums because they always do it right too. For football, you're only in there 10 times a year, hopefully, or 8 this year. And the 49ers, as they went to a 2-14 team in 2016, that stadium, the attendance level is really low. And then Shanahan comes in 2017, they start winning. Jimmy Garoppolo, heartthrob, comes in, he starts going undefeated. And next thing you know, the team starts out last year 8-0. And by that mid-season, that stadium was rocking. It was loud. It had become like every other NFL stadium that's very loud. And they designed the 49ers stadium. You see here the Sweet Tower that's on the west side. It goes 8 stories tall. It's supposed to, all the crowd noise is supposed to bounce back off it and onto the field. But we had only heard that at rock concerts. And then as the season was going on last year, you kind of got a sense that this was a cool place to be. So, but here's one thing for all the Southern California guys to realize. And I probably did stories on this when the Niners were stinking those first couple years at Levi's. I think historically teams do very bad their first year in a stadium, in a brand new stadium. So there's some kind of, go back through the research on that, but it's not a pro for teams.
Well, let's talk about teams when they are in a particular situation. Stick with the NFC West a little bit for you and Kevin, Cam.
Yeah.
Very talented division. The past 2 NFC representatives in the Super Bowl came from that division. One didn't respond that well, had maybe what we call the so-called Super Bowl hangover. Mm-hmm. Is there anything to that? And just how do you see the division shaping up this year? So let's start with you, Cam.
Oh, okay. Well, is there something to the Super Bowl hangover? When there's only been 3 teams that have rebounded from a Super Bowl loss and have won the next year, I'd say yes. But the 49ers in 2013, when they were trying to get back to the Super Bowl, they were a Navarro Bowman knee injury away from probably doing it, right? They made it to the championship game again. It depends on the makeup of the team. Are they young and are they hungry? Or did they already get their money and they just want to get cruising in life? The 49ers are pretty young. They're hungry. A lot of consistency there, a lot of familiar faces. I think that's what's key. Maybe you add a couple different guys. That's part of any NFL team. So I think they are primed for another long run. Seattle has Russell Wilson, so you can never count them out. I thought Seattle would dip really low last year, and they were right there with it at the end again. The Rams, I kind of anticipated a drop-off with them, just knowing that they took a lot of flyers on guys, and then they started losing guys, and then the offensive line was terrible. Jared Goff was kind of still figuring out the NFL, and I wasn't convinced about their defense. And I got a lot of those similar questions about the Rams this year. And then the Cardinals are the trendy pick this year in the NFC West because they brought in DeAndre Hopkins. Kyler Murray's going to be second year with Cliff Kingsbury. But again, I kind of like to look at but their lines stink. And I think in football, that's a major factor. So I don't think the Cardinals are very threatening. So I think it's still the 49ers and Rams and the Seahawks, definitely.
Kevin, how do you see it shaping up? And are the Rams better positioned this year, or have they, you know, have they lost a little bit too much in some key areas? What do you think? Yeah.
Let me try to offer some insight about the Super Bowl hangover. You know, the Rams shrugged off the possibility before last season, and by the end of the season, we're admitting that there is something that happens. They wouldn't admit that it had anything to do with loss of motivation on their part. It was more, they thought, about opponents and the Rams' failure to stay ahead of opponents, right? You make a long playoff run, everybody is watching you. They copy some of the things you do well, and they plot to stop others. And I think by the end of last season, Sean McVay realized that he hadn't changed enough, and that the definition of insanity in the NFL is doing the same thing, expecting the same result. So the Rams got figured out a little bit, and had huge drop-offs on offense in both rushing and passing phases of the game. And now they're a team that missed the playoffs, lost some big guys, and are counting on young players to step up to replace, no less than Todd Gurley and a key wide receiver and most of the linebacking core. And they're having to do all of this implementation of change with new coordinators as well in a training camp that's restricted and with no preseason games to audition players. So they're kind of up against it. I think the 8-win over-under line is probably about right for them, which would put them right on the outside of the even the expanded playoff field. Les Snead, the general manager, said the other day that he considers the Rams to still be in the phase of contention. So they're not blowing off the season by any means, but the division hasn't gotten any easier at the top, and it's getting harder with Arizona moving up from the bottom. So I guess I feel the same way about the Rams as I do about the NFL season itself. Don't expect much and be pleasantly surprised if it turns out different.
I get it. So when we talk about tough divisions, in my deep research, I found out that in the AFC West, there's this guy named Patrick Mahomes and a team called the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chargers and the Raiders are up against what some people think might be the next NFL dynasty. How are they stacking up this year to try to take down the Chiefs and maybe become that team in the AFC? Let's start with you, Gilbert. What do you think about the Chargers' chances this year?
Yeah, it's kind of a race for second in the AFC West. I don't think anybody, is viewed as a real threat to the Chiefs right now. It will be a pretty big shocker to see the Broncos, the Raiders, or the Chargers oversee the Chiefs. But for the Chargers' point of view, they went with loading up the defense to stop Patrick Mahomes. There's a bunch of talent on the defense, from Joey Bosa to Melvin Ingram to Derwin James. They added Chris Harris Jr., Linval Joseph. They drafted Kenneth Murray. So when it comes to defense, they're pretty stacked. And when I think the couple of times they've played Patrick Mahomes, they've done pretty well than most teams. So they kind of have a formula at least to contain them for a little bit. But just when it comes to the overall view of the Chargers, you got question marks at quarterback. Is Tyrod Taylor finally going to be a different quarterback? He's already 10 years in on a third team. Is Justin Herbert going to be ready to maybe surpass him right away? And you have question marks at left tackle. You traded Russell Okung. You're going to throw in a second-year guy who was playing Division III football 2 years ago. So when it comes to probably the two biggest positions in football, left tackle and quarterback, you have question marks. But if you could maybe keep teams under 20 points, you have a chance with this defense, because they're going to be very loaded. I don't know how good they're going to be, but they have a good chance.
Well, and the Raiders are loaded at some positions, right, Jerry? The question for some people is going to be Derek Carr until he proves that he is the guy that they once really hope, or that they still hope he can be. What do you think about them this year?
I think their biggest problem with the Chiefs is is defensively. I mean, the Raiders have been an awful defensive team for the better part of the last 25 years. And they have kind of huge overhaul this year in terms of talent and speed. And I think they've got two linebackers that they think can actually run and cover people, which they almost never have. They got Corey Littleton from the Rams, and they signed this guy Nick Kwiatkowski from the Bears, who they like. And linebackers who can run is pretty much a new concept for them. They've also revamped the secondary. The thing is, they're going to have 15 practices to get these guys ready to play together as a team. You know, and when you got Mahomes on the other side, you make a mistake and he makes you pay for it. And you know, they're not. I don't think they're ready for the Chiefs yet. The Chiefs have just totally dominated them ever since Andy Reid got there, and that's their big Everest, and they talk about it all the time. But I think they're more looking towards getting to 9 wins. And as far as Derek Carr goes, he just needs to get the ball in the end zone. I mean, and as stupid as that sounds, and as simple as that sounds, you know, he's averaged 20 points a game. You know, there's only a certain amount of quarterbacks. I think it's 36 quarterbacks have played 90 games over the last 20 years. Derek Carr averages 20.3 points per game. The only guy that's lower out of guys that have played 36 games is Kerry Collins at 19.6. Everybody else is higher. So Derek Carr and the Raiders, they can, especially last year, they can move the ball between the 20s, but they can't score. And if Ruggs can help with that, if they can, you know, do better in short yardage and control the clock, and, you know, Gruden's basically a conservative, pile up the completions guy and work that. That's their formula. Whether they're ready for it this or not this year, we'll see. I think they might be able to get to 9 wins.
Okay. Well, I want to turn this over to our audience members because they've got some good questions. And one of the ones that's kind of the most pressing right now, Nicholas Wong is asking, anybody out of you expect a last-second opt-out from the teams that you cover?
In terms of the 49ers, they've only had one, and that was Travis Benjamin so far, which wasn't a big surprise. Now, I think the big alert that we're kind of watching over the next 2 hours is whether some blockbuster opt-out like George Kittle decides to opt out rather than get a contract extension, all right? I don't sense that. I think that maybe just be a business ploy because, you know, Kyle Shanahan told us Monday that things should get taken care of. I think there's always a potential for the surprise. I mean, the NFL is a business, and these guys realize it, or their agents are pushing it. So there could be a big one for any 4 of these teams.
Yeah, today is the deadline. We'll see, but I'm not hearing anything with the Rams. They've had one so far.
I don't see much going on with the Raiders. I think in the NFL too, it's like your career is so short. You know, 3 years or so. It's just not like baseball where you've got a guaranteed contract and you can do that. You know, in football, you've only got a few years to play usually, and most guys are going to try and play. It's kind of what we talked about earlier about the next man up thing. It's kind of what they're conditioned to do, and I think mostly that's what you're going to see.
Same for the Chargers. Nothing going on yet. You've got 2 hours to the deadline. I think for the Chargers, 2 years ago, they were a 12-4 team. They go 5-11 a year ago. I think maybe a lot of guys are motivated to come back. A lot of people don't want to lose a year of football. Your careers are so short-lived. Why not try it out in a pandemic?
Okay. This one's for you specifically, Kevin. Arsenal, which is owned by Stan Kroenke, has had to lay off a bunch of employees, I guess 55. Tim Hand is asking, do you expect the Rams are going to suffer any kind of a similar fate, especially with the cost of SoFi?
Glad to see it for Arsenal, which beat my Chelsea in the FA Cup final. But I don't see that. I don't know what the differences might be between, Premier League team's finances and an NFL team's finances. It's a good question. I'll take it as impetus to try to figure that out.
All right. So we've got a couple of questions about standing or kneeling for the anthem. Steve Hyde is asking, do you feel players should take a knee before the game or do it on their own time if they're going to try to make a stand? And then Christian Millard is talking about how with much of academia, entertainment, and sports, similar to an echo chamber of liberal ideas, are the courageous folks the ones who stand for the anthem these days? Anybody want to touch that one?
I'll handle it. I feel like I'm very well experienced in interpreting this. It's all a personal opinion, whether you think they're right or wrong doing it, whether they want to do it or not. I mean, as the Colin Kaepernick kneeling happened in 2016 and a couple of teammates joined him, that was big news the first couple weeks, right? And every game we would like make notes in the press box on who was kneeling, right? And yeah, now maybe it's who's not kneeling. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a separate story to me than what's going on the field. We have such short attention spans in our media that story, once it's covered right away, we kind of move on to, okay, what's next? But personally, I think it's really up to the individual, whether it's the fan or the player, and how they interpreted those actions.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this one?
I was at a training camp practice, I think 2 years ago in Napa, and there was, the Raiders are constantly having military guests along the sideline, and there was a couple of Navy SEALs there, and just informally along the sidelines, I was talking to them, and one of them said something that has kind of always resonated with me, and what I've always thought was that he said personally, no, I hate it when people don't stand, but frankly, that's what we're here for, because this is the one country where you don't have to do that. Government doesn't make you do anything. I personally stand. I've always standed, but I have no problem with people that choose to kneel.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a personal, up to you kind of thing. But I don't think I'm convinced that we're going to see a lot of kneeling during the anthem this year, because the whole point, 3 or 4 years ago, was to raise awareness for police brutality and social justice. And now that there's finally some awareness, now how do you kind of go further? How do you kind of start making some actions and expand on the awareness? It's kind of sad that it took 4 years for teams and players and owners and fans to kind of finally figure out the message. But it seems like we had some progress finally, and and it took some protests to get people to finally listen. And sometimes you have to go that route. What Colin Kaepernick was trying to do was a peaceful protest. That wasn't enough. Now there's finally some awareness. So I think players might start doing some things differently. So it won't. I know people are still very touchy about that subject, but I don't think you will see too much of it this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, people, whether they're athletes kneeling on a field or demonstrators closing blocking a freeway, they're trying to draw attention to something they believe in, and by definition, it upsets people. That's the idea: is to be disruptive and call attention. The fact that we're seeing athletes in other sports kneeling now, this year almost routinely, it maybe has pushed it to the point where it's no longer disruptive, and whether that's a step in the right direction is up to those on one side of the issue or another.
Okay, let's go back to the coronavirus real quick. Got questions about roster sizes and then the age and relative health of players. So if you're someone as ancient as, say, Tom Brady, are you being warned that you're inching into that risk group, or and then what are they doing for in terms of rosters so people can understand that this year? Anybody want to take this one?
So because I was just looking at this morning, or kind of getting briefed up on the opt-out clauses, and you have the voluntary guys, but the guys that are considered the high risk, right? The age is not listed, Todd. So it's like they don't want to discriminate on age like other businesses, right? It's more about the inner health conditions, whether you have asthma, diabetes, liver issues, but here's the thing that I was wondering about was, since Thursday's the opt-out or today's the opt-out, what happens if you catch the coronavirus and you're debilitated going forward? I believe that's an amendment where you can get out of the season that way. Or if somebody, I believe a family member catches it and is in the hospital, then you're also allowed to withdraw from the season. I still think there's moving parts, but like in terms of the roster, you 53-man roster, but you have an expanded practice squad from 10 to 16 to stash guys, but you're not talking about stashing veterans. I mean, these are guys that are 2 or 3 years into the league at max.
Yeah, Todd, I don't think it's about age. I think it could be a weight thing. A lot of these guys who opted out are defensive tackles. I think about half of the players on the opt-out list are defensive tackles because they're bigger, they're bulkier. You need the size to kind of get that push up front. So like Cam was saying, whatever your health conditions are and your weight, I think that's what you're looking at more.
Yeah, on age stuff with Tom Brady, I just take any chance I can for a cheap shot at him. Like I said, I'm a Dolphins fan. So, all right. The only other question we had, and we need to wrap it up, but it looks like Jerry got knocked off. But what do you all think? Will Marcus Mariota get a shot at that starting job in Las Vegas?
I'm really curious to see what happens. I mean, Jerry can cite all those great stats about Derek Carr's scoring percentage, but these last couple of years, and mind you, I haven't been like really dead on the Raiders, but there's this sense that he doesn't have the support of the team, and there was a lot of questions whether Gruden really wanted him or if he'd get somebody else, and they're paying him a lot for this year. I think you're going to see Mariota at some point. Absolutely. I mean, it's so rare in the NFL that you're going to be a 16-game starter, and those that are the guys that are entrenched, that have proven that they can get to the playoffs and win a playoff game, and Derek's not there.
Yep. All right. Well, we should wrap this up now, and really appreciate all of you for joining us for this Newsroom at Home sports series on this our NFL entry, and I think great discussion. Wanted to thank Cam Inman, covers the 49ers for the Bay Area News Group, Jerry McDonald, who covers the Raiders and will also do 49ers this year for the Bay Area News Group. Then from Southern California News Group, we've got Kevin Modesti on the Rams and Gilbert Manzano on the Chargers. Please follow them. This was a great discussion. I want to turn it back over to Aaron.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having the conversation. Just like Todd said, we are wrapping up today. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you enjoyed it. On screen, you should see a little bit about our next episodes that I did go over. If you guys have any questions for us, for our Bay Area News Group subscribers, you're more than welcome to email theevents@bayareanewsgroup.com. For our Southern California gang, it will be events@scng.com. Don't forget to sign up for our next events. Bay Area News Group, we have our wine tasting. And then for Southern California News Group, tomorrow is our last episode of our Lit Up series. So please go ahead and register. And I think that's it. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful Thursday afternoon, and we'll see y'all later.